everyone, and welcome to another edition of Community Connection. I'm your host, Siham Awada Jaafar, and today my guest is Detroit FBI Special Agent in Charge, Mr. Paul Abbate. Congratulations is in order to you, but first of all, congratulations and welcome to Community Connection.
Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for being here. You've been here for how long now? Just over...
Here in Michigan?
In Michigan.
In Detroit. I've been here for just about 2 years.
2 years. Yeah. And as I said, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations are certainly in order.
It's sad to be leaving.
Our loss, definitely, but you are going to Washington, D.C. and tell us about this new appointment.
So I'm, sadly for me, I'm going to be leaving here probably about a month from now. I'm going to Washington to take the position as Assistant Director for our Washington Field Office, which covers Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia. So I'm grateful for that opportunity, but it's going to be sad to leave Michigan in the Detroit area because I've made so many great friends here and I feel a part of the communities that we serve here.
Absolutely, and you've done such an amazing job, and I
Thank
think that was definitely evident, and so therefore that's probably why the switch happened. So you shouldn't have done such a great job, Paul. But we are going to miss you. But you have done some amazing things, created so many relationships, and really it created a trust factor that I really haven't seen in a long time within those relationships. So what was your vision, and how did you really approach that factor in terms of getting into the community and creating that trust? What was your first thing on your agenda?
Yeah,
2 years ago?
The way that I look at it, and we look at it, within the FBI, is we serve the people. We work on behalf of the people, everyone fairly and equally, and our core mission really is to protect people and keep them safe from a wide variety of threats that are out there. But at its essence, it's about keeping people safe. So I think in the best way to do that, we need to work with the people we serve.
Absolutely.
In the communities, and we need to understand, the issues that are out there and what the needs and concerns are in order to best, carry out our duties and our mission that I just described. So that's part of it. That's a big part of it. As you said, building the relationships, building the trust in advance of something bad happening or facing a crisis. And then I also think about it in terms of our organization and building it and making it more diverse. And, the fact is, over time, the FBI, like many other, government entities and even in the private sector, has been challenged in terms of diversifying the employee workforce. So I think it's important for us to reach out to get people from diverse communities interested in the work that we do and work hard to bring them into the organization so we do better reflect the people that we serve. So I think about it in those two ways.
Absolutely. And given the state of affairs and given things happening internationally and nationally, it's a challenge to really govern on a non-biased level. So what are the tools that you use to actually do that? I mean, you've done a phenomenal job in doing that, and Mr. Foley before you was phenomenal as well. But it is difficult and it is challenging given the state of affairs. So what are the tools that you use in regards to doing that? Is it creating those relationships within the community or being able to sort of balance, what you're doing against what's out there in terms of media and things that are happening?
I think the key thing is being fair. We are part of government, but we're non-political. It's essential that we stay objective in the work that we do, and we deal with facts. And again, we treat everybody fairly and equally and serve everyone fairly and equally. So I think that's the starting point. We operate within a strict set of policies and guidelines that govern us within both DOJ and the FBI, and then under the U.S. Constitution. We operate within that framework in terms of carrying out the work that we do. So I think That's critical. And then again, building the relationships, getting out there and meeting people and taking time with people to really listen to people.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that's lost a lot of times, because it does take time and effort and hard work and an extra commitment to do that. And I feel that, you know, we beyond just the daily work that we do in investigating crime, developing intelligence to keep people safe and doing that, we put a lot of extra effort and resources and investment through our office in getting out and, again, meeting the people in the communities that we serve so that they can get to know us and we can get to know them. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And like you said, the bottom line is to protect individuals from outside entities and whatever it is. Recently, there was a lot of media coverage in regards to drones that were being flown over certain areas.
Not drones, planes.
Planes. I'm sorry, planes that were being flown over different areas that were there for specific surveillance kind of initiatives. There was also a conversation that Dearborn was being targeted because of the Muslim Arab population there. And I know that you appeared on, or a few people appeared on Let It Rip, and then there were community conversations.
Yeah.
You did not. A few others did.
But I did speak with a number of members of the media and did interviews, and we also, I went out and had participated in a community meeting as well to be transparent and to answer questions surrounding the reporting.
Well, these planes obviously flew over other areas too, not just Dearborn. So what was? Can you shed some light a little bit on why it was interpreted that Dearborn was being singled out, where basically it was sort of across the board? Am I understanding that correctly?
As a starting point, so just dealing in the facts, the original reporting here was based on conclusions that were, or speculation that was drawn by the reporting itself. It didn't have a factual basis. It's not something that came from us, and we would never get into acknowledging details of our operations, investigations, or what we do. But I did think it was important to get out quickly, particularly in answering questions from community members, and again, the people that we serve, to acknowledge, one, it's no secret, we do, when appropriate and authorized and lawful in the context of investigations, we do conduct, surveillance. We do that through a variety of different means, one of which includes using aviation assets. We've acknowledged that publicly in the past on a national basis, and it's true here in Michigan. We routinely employ aviation assets as well as cars, vehicles, and people on foot to conduct surveillance of specific individuals when lawful and appropriate. And that means when we have a predicated investigation that's authorized under the Attorney General guidelines and the FBI policy and guidelines as well. That's it. So we're doing that every day, probably, in an effort to protect people, like we talked about earlier. What we do not do, and what was drawn in the media reporting, what we do not do is conduct mass surveillance. I want to make that clear. We do not conduct mass surveillance, nor do we target specific communities. We're not authorized to do that under the law or our policy or our guidelines, which are very rigorous. So that's the most important thing, and that's what I wanted to make clear to everybody, and I want everyone to know.
Well, I think you were very diligent in sending that information out and making sure that people, understood the situation. But there has been such a conversation, too, nationally and internationally, in regards to people's privacy, our civil liberties, basically eavesdropping, all these different things that have come to play in hopes that we can stay safe and in hopes to, counter any, terrorist activities. How safe are we in your perception? Are we safer now with these things in place, or are we just eroding our civil liberties on a daily basis?
I think, we're concerned. We have privacy concerns too. We're people as well. We're private citizens. We're all concerned about that. And, we think it's good to have a questioning and scrutiny and oversight for us because of the power that exists within the government. But I want everyone to know also that while there are techniques that we can employ within the law to conduct our investigations, again, it's done under within a very rigorous framework of law, policy, and guidelines with a lot of oversight. So it's not it's not done on a mass level. It's always done under a specific investigation. And then if you get into monitoring of telephone calls or email or anything that would go into the private realm, anything like that has to be authorized by a judge based on probable cause. And there's a lengthy and rigorous process that has to be followed in order to get the authorization to do that. And anything that's done outside of the scope of that would be illegal, and we cannot do that.
So we're still operating on the it's just cause kind of probable cause.
And when needed. That's one thing. So
and that's important.
Only when legally authorized and the process is followed can we in the FBI or other investigative or law enforcement or intelligence agencies endeavor to employ techniques like that.
Good to know.
On the safety side, I do, we work hard to ensure public safety and to protect people, like we said before. So that's what we're doing 24/7 from our vantage point.
And that's priority, I think, from any
Absolutely.
Citizen. A law-abiding citizen would want that kind of surveillance to make sure that people are safe. But again, that conversation in terms of how far do you go, and many innocent people are having their privacy disrupted or their civil liberties taken away because of maybe lack of the probable cause that we're talking about. So coming from you, someone that is very much trusted and has had the history that you've had, that has a lot of weight, rather than coming from someone else who may have another agenda. So that conversation is really important to have and to settle the minds of those individuals who sense those kinds of things. You have had such a stellar career. I mean, just reading about what you've done and where you've been and the experiences that you've had, it's no doubt that you're heading to Washington and going to do some amazing things out there. You have a degree in law, of course, from the University of Connecticut, but you started off in the New York office, right? And you were on the SWAT team.
I was, yeah.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was exciting.
What was that like? What kind of calls were you on? What did you do? Can you talk about that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our SWAT teams, we have one in every field office. It's actually sort of an auxiliary duty. It's a part-time job. So mainly we serve as FBI agents. We serve as investigators. That's our primary duty.
So do you actually have the garb on with the guns and
Sometimes.
running out of the truck? That's
Sometimes.
the vision I have.
Yeah, the SWAT teams are designed for to be utilized in high-risk scenarios.
Sure.
If there's someone who has, if we have an arrest warrant and we're going to arrest somebody, and we know that they have a bunch of weapons, or they have a violent history that's documented, we would likely employ the SWAT team so that we're going there prepared for the worst case scenario in case somebody did try to use a weapon to prevent being arrested or something like that.
Can you share one of those incidents that the SWAT team had to go out in New York when you were there?
In New York, well, we have a SWAT team here too,
Right.
so I'm going to focus on Detroit. I mean,
Okay, so you're
we just had a fairly large operation that we did last week within in and around the city of Detroit, where we went out and arrested 17 or so alleged gang members for again, as allegations of various criminal activity, drug dealing, violence, and things like that. So in a situation like that, that's when we would use our SWAT team. And we did use the SWAT team here, the Detroit Field Office SWAT team, last week, along with other SWAT teams from partners that we work with, like the Detroit Police Department, Michigan State Police, and other federal agencies. We would use the teams to go in to ensure that nobody gets hurt.
How is that relationship in regards to the FBI, the local police departments? What's the relationship there, and how do you collaborate when things like that are on the table?
Yeah, we're working together every day. I think one of the things that I've noted here in the Detroit metropolitan area and throughout Michigan really is the great relationships that exist, not just between us and the community, but also between and among the law enforcement agencies and those charged with protecting public safety. I've worked, as you noted, in a lot of different places, and not that it's bad in those places, but I will say on record, I think the relationships broadly here are better than anywhere that I've worked before, and that existed when I got here, and I think we've worked hard
built on that,
to
absolutely.
even build upon that
Yes.
some more. So, and a lot of it is done, most of the work we carry out is done in a joint environment, in a task force environment, which brings representatives from all the departments and agencies together, and we work literally, our personnel work side by side, desk to desk, computer to computer, phone to phone, every day, so that they're in a position to collaborate at the working level on up and share information, intelligence in order to get the job done. And it works really well here.
9/11 was such a turning point for our country in general, nationally, internationally, and with my experience, even pre 9/11 and post 9/11, there was really a disconnect within the agencies in regards to their communication process. One agency would make a decision where the other agency didn't know, and so there was no collaboration or no connectivity in regards to the right hand knowing what the left hand was doing. Where have we come with that? Has there been a lot more progress in regards to more agency communications?
Yeah.
Knowing who's doing what, and who's on a fly list and who's been taken off, and having that communication.
There's a huge amount of progress. It's like night and day. So we've all read about and heard about the criticism of that, and that was a major problem. That led in part to tragic consequences. But we've come a huge distance from that point. And as I just described, I mean, whether it's at the federal,
Local
state, or
federal.
local level, and intermixed between and among all of those levels, there's just great communication, collaboration, and coordination that I see, not just here, but nationally and even internationally. So we've made a huge amount of progress in that regard. I think we're way better off than we've ever been, given where we're at. But I will say we can never forget, and we need to continue to work hard at that, day in and day out and going forward in the future, because we can't relax and rely upon and rest upon our accomplishments from yesterday.
Absolutely.
We need to always build upon that, think about it, and communication is one of the hardest things we do to achieve, no matter what you're doing, whether it's in government or business or just personally, I think. So we can never forget that, and we always have to work really hard at maintaining that as we go forward.
Absolutely. That's primary. You were part of the counterterrorism division in Iraq. You also were deployed to Iraq, and you led the counterterrorism investigations. What was that like? I mean, you were on the ground, basically in a country, a war-torn country, and what was your role there, and what was your takeaway from that experience?
Yeah, so I was there representing as an FBI representative. We played a key role there, and really what that is about, being sort of forward deployed, and with a lot of FBI personnel, was about working again with our partners from the Department of Defense, the military, and other agencies to sort of develop the intelligence picture distant and away from here, the U.S.
Sure.
homeland, and identify threats there before they get here. That's really what that effort was all about, and why we're over there, and we're still there. So, things have wound down and concluded in both Iraq and Afghanistan.
You were in Afghanistan as well.
Both, yes. But we have an extensive network throughout the world still. In I think 80 plus countries now. We have what's called legal attaché offices that are in many of the U.S. embassies and consulates throughout the world, and we have FBI personnel, deployed there around the world, again, to work and collaborate with other government partners, the law enforcement intelligence agencies and other countries, again, to share information and collaborate to try to identify threats there and here, and threats before they get here, and prevent things from happening. That's really our goal. We are very good at coming in after the fact when crimes occur.
Right.
Or tragedies occur, and investigating that and collecting evidence and putting a case together. But that is not where we want to be. We want to be in a position where we're actually identifying threats
Prior.
Before they occur and stopping it from happening so that no harm comes to anyone.
And that's vital, definitely
Yeah.
vital. Given those experiences, I know you were involved in talking about what you just mentioned, the underwear bomber that was over Detroit. Now, you were involved in that as well?
I wasn't personally involved in that here. I was working in our counterterrorism division back in Washington, D.C.
Right.
at our headquarters at the time. So from headquarters, we really play a support
Sure,
role
absolutely.
in that. And we did provide, and I was involved in providing support and facilitation to the Detroit field office and the work that was being done, on the ground here at the time that event happened and in the aftermath.
And that was diverted. So in regards to those kinds of things, how confident are you as the FBI and, in regards to counterterrorism, how confident are we as a country in being able to spot those things right now and to be able to, abort them prior to anything going forward? I mean, where are we at right now? Are we safer? Do we have those things in place? Obviously, it's always a work in progress. But given our history to where we are now, what would your assessment be?
I'm confident, and I think people should be confident generally in our safety. I think we've progressed a lot in the, mechanisms and structure and organization that we have in place has come a long way and has made us safer today. So I think generally from the public standpoint, the community standpoint, people should feel confident in terms of leading their lives and going out and not worrying about that. But I say that everyone still needs to remain vigilant. That's a constant message. I think it's everyone's responsibility, no matter who you are, to maintain a certain amount of vigilance and awareness and be on the lookout for things that just don't feel right or may be deemed suspicious. And if you see something like that, no matter how minor you think it is, we would want people to report that to the local police department or to us for follow-up. From our standpoint, we never rest. We have a 24/7 job, and we know that anything can happen anywhere, anytime. And we work hard to stop and prevent bad things from happening. That's what we do. So we're always uneasy, we're always concerned, but I don't think that's the way everyone should feel. And people should be confident in terms of what we do and what we've got
Well,
going
having
on.
you always on alert is a good thing, so we're not going to worry about that.
Yeah.
That's
That's our
definitely a
job.
good thing. But how do you balance what's going on internationally with the domestic terrorism that is happening in our country too? There's a huge rise in regards to what's going on in Ferguson.
Mm-hmm.
What happened in Chapel Hill, what happened in Chattanooga, all these different areas. How do we address that as a country and as a nation in terms of the racial distress that we're experiencing? Community policing has really taken another aspect as well. So how do we look at that as a nation, and how do we look at that locally here in Detroit?
Yeah, I think, from our standpoint, from the FBI and for our law enforcement partners, we're, really focused on stopping the threat and stopping harm from occurring, no matter what the motivation is or what it stems from. So we look at it that way. I don't think it would be wrong for us to focus our attention on any one thing. We need to understand, the various motivators and what's out there and what the landscape is, but we have to be very open-minded in terms of what's coming at us and what could potentially hurt people, and work to stop that in advance. So we don't focus just on international terrorism or domestic terrorism. They're both among the highest priorities for us in terms of what we do, and we've got our attention on both of them in both areas, among many other areas.
You're going to Washington, D.C. So tell us a little bit about, sadly so, that you're leaving us. It's a double-edged sword. I think you're going to do a phenomenal job, and having you there is something that's going to rest very easy on a lot of people's minds, but you are leaving us to do that. But what is your role now? You're going to Washington as the assistant director in charge of the FBI field office there. Now, how does that relate to what's happening here? Are you still overseeing things that are going to be happening in the Detroit area, or are you strictly Washington, Virginia area?
I won't be directly overseeing things here in Detroit or Michigan. Although we're the Detroit...
Can we just say you are?
I plan to stay involved and connected, though. So a successor has not been named right now, but I'm following that very closely, and we expect that the FBI director will name somebody very soon, probably within the next few weeks, to replace me, and then I'll work hand in hand with that person, probably on a continuing basis, to make sure that we have a good transition and understanding of all the complexities that exist out here in the environment. And I plan to continue to stay involved out here and in touch with people.
Good.
And make sure that things stay on course. Yeah. And then back in D.C., it's kind of like the same job I do here, but it's D.C. and Northern Virginia. It's a little bit. It's a larger field office that we have here, but they're both among the top 10 offices in terms of size within the FBI.
Well, Mr. Paul Abbate, we wish you the best in D.C., and don't forget about us here in Metro Detroit. So
Is that it?
Keep your eye there. Yes. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us on Community Connection. We wish you the
I
best.
appreciate it.
Special Agent in Charge, Mr. Paul Abbate, has been our guest on Community Connection. Thank you for listening in. We'll see you next time.